that introduction, and let me begin by apologising for the fact that the presentation is in English and not in German. My German is terrible, so I think you're going to understand much more if I speak in English than in German. So apologies, and hopefully if we are at the event next year, I'll try and do the presentation in German. Just one last point before we get into the content of the presentation, and that is that as you leave, my colleague will be there, and there's various supplementary materials about the technology, and if you'd like to stop and speak with us, we will be there. We're also in the main auditorium, I think just by the female toilets. That's sort of a reflection on ourselves, I hope. So please, if you have any questions, and we run out of time, and you'd like to pick up those questions and chat with myself personally, please feel free to come up to the stand and engage with me. We're there all afternoon, and also we're at the networking event in the evening. And again, please feel free to come up to me, give me a poke, and say, I would like to speak to you, please. Whether it's regarding the presentation or whether it's regarding generally cybercrime and cyber-related issues. Okay, I want to give you a very quick introduction about the company, because I'm sure many of you will not have heard of Blueliv. We are a company that's based out of Barcelona, and we have been going for about 7 or 8 years. We have a large number of customers both in Spain and both in South America, predominantly in the financial services sector, but we also have utility companies, etc., etc. That's enough of the general overview. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the agenda today. I want to take a look at what is the general cybercrime threat landscape looking like. And before I begin, can I just quickly ask for a show of hands? Are there any sort of technical people in the audience? And what I mean by technical, people that are reversing malware, looking at malware on a day-to-day basis. Do we have many sort of hardcore technical people? 1, 2, okay. So what I'll do is, some of the slides are quite technical. I'll try and zip through those because we've only got a handful of people that are interested in the really techie stuff. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the technical side. We're going to look at the general landscape, and then we're going to look at specific threats that are affecting organizations. Okay, what's the general landscape looking like? Whoa. There we go. What's the general landscape looking like? If I was to ask how many of you had heard of Zeus, could I just get a show of hands if it's Zeus? Okay, excellent. So you're all familiar with Zeus. And if I mention those types of malware, are those things that people have heard of? Trojan bankers, just nod. Yeah, okay, excellent. Point of sales, malware, yeah, less heads nodding. We'll look at point of sales in quite a lot of detail, and password steals, I'm sure most people are familiar with those. I'm not proposing covering off ransomware because that's very general, and people generally are aware of what threats are posed by ransomware. Okay, now I want to start off by just covering at a very high level what the general threat landscape looks like. And some of you in the audience may be thinking, well, he's left off something that's really critical, and that's APTs. And I've done that deliberately because the purpose of the presentation isn't to cover off APTs, but I do acknowledge that they're quite important, and I will come back to those at the end of this first slide. Now, Zeus, one of the most prevalent types of banking Trojans in circulation. According to the Blueliv Cyber Threat Intelligence Platform, it was one of the most active in 2014. We've also, and for those of you that are not familiar with Zeus, Zeus works by actually injecting HTML code into the banking session for the end user and presents false pop-ups which enables the malware to steal the logon credentials for the end customer. We saw also in 2014 a significant increase in the number of mobile malware binaries that we were detecting, processing and analysing, and that's an attack vector that we again expect to grow significantly in 2015. Interestingly, as I was looking at the information specifically from the Blueliv Cyber Threat Intelligence Platform, Germany was the 6th most targeted country in all of the samples that we were looking at and all of the intelligence that we were pulling back, and that was quite interesting. dive again for some of the technical people in the audience. Some of these names will be familiar, for others they won't, so I want to cover each of these in turn. Zeus we've touched upon. Citadel was in existence a couple of years ago. Citadel is a variant of Zeus. It has the ability to steal banking credentials. What was interesting about Citadel was that this was one of the first pieces of malware that we saw that had the ability to detect whether or not it was being run in a virtual machine. Now the significance of that is that a lot of the analysis that researchers and organisations like Blueliv, one of the things that we do is run the malware in a virtual machine. So it actually was trying to understand, am I being run in a virtual machine? If I am, I'm going to refuse to run. So one of the most interesting features about Citadel. Shylock. Now again, just sort of a question generally, perhaps more so for the techies. Have you gents heard of Shylock? No? Okay, we're going to go. Right, so Shylock specifically targeted UK banks, and I come from the UK banking industry. It wasn't as popular as some of the other banking Trojans, but was specifically targeting UK banks. Now Shylock, for those of you that are interested in English literature, is actually a character in a William Shakespeare play, The Merchant of Venice, and that's where the name actually comes from, Shylock. It was actually taken down by UK authorities after it had been in existence for a couple of years, so it's no longer active. Gozi was in existence from approximately 2007 to 2013. Gozi was particularly interesting because the developers, the malicious actors who developed Gozi, were very, very careful about to whom they actually sold the banking Trojan to, and spent a great deal of time and effort into developing techniques that prevented the Gozi malware being detected on an end user's machine. So what cyber criminals, as some of you will know, are that they're researching and understanding some of the endpoint technology that's deployed to end customers' machines. And what they're specifically doing is building functionality to knock those endpoint protection out. So whether that be antivirus, but there's some other endpoint security tools that are used to protect the end user's machine. Gozi developed techniques to knock those out. Now, even though they were very careful to whom they actually sold their malware to, they were eventually taken down by law enforcement authorities in 2013, so not careful enough. Credex, I'm never quite sure the exact pronunciation. Whenever I listen to people, everyone pronounces it in a slightly different way. And the reason why I've got Credex up there is that one of the other problems that we face generally within industries, that when banking Trojans come out, different organisations and different institutions tend to give the same piece of malware different names. So that's a big problem for end customers, because the end customers are thinking, well, is this something that I've seen before, or is this something new? So Credex goes by these names, Drydex, Dredex as well. Again, it's a banking Trojan. It's looking to inject itself into the session, looking to steal banking credentials. And finally, we've got Cinewat, which is going back in time now. This was one of the earliest forms of banking Trojans that existed. Has the ability to break two-factor authentication. That was really big news when it first came out. Not such big news now. And what we're going to sort of do a deep dive into now is we're going to look into Dre, or sometimes I even call it Dr. Dre after the famous musician. It's easier to remember. Okay, this is a high-level pictorial representation as to how the infection, the end user, is infected. Now, it's very, very simple. You can see that. I'm not proposing on delving into too much detail here. The most important point being here, you've got the browser injection here, waits for the bank connection, and then performs man in the middle, or man in the browser. If I use that expression, man in the browser, man in the middle, do most people understand what that means? Yeah? Yeah? Brilliant. Okay, excellent. So let's take a look at what is actually happening at code level. Okay, when we're looking at dry. Now what you can actually see here in the bottom box, and I want to point out, these are the trigger URLs. What's the trigger URL? The trigger URL is what actually activates the malware. Because what actually happens is that once the user is infected, the malware remains at the endpoint and main silo. It will only activate when specific trigger points are actually entered into the browser. These trigger points, in this instance, we have Bank of America, and we're looking at Citigroup. By the way, I'm not picking on those two particular banks. I'm not saying that they're more vulnerable than other banks. Just in this sample that we were working with, those were the two banks that we came across. Those are the trigger URLs. So as soon as the user is sat there and types those URLs in, the malware is activated. Okay, let's go to the top box there. At the top box, you can see an IP address, 65.49.8.122. That's the redirect to the command and control server. Okay? Once you get to the command and control server, the infected asset has to be authenticated. So it's actually authenticating the bot. Again, this is another technique in an attempt to knock out researchers and organizations such as Blueliv analyzing the malware. This long piece of code here that you can see, that's the actual authentication key. That is the key that's used by the bot to authenticate with the command and control server. Different organizations have different authentication keys. So in this instance, this is the Bank of America. You can see it ends in 12081.com. And if you take a look at, where is the authentication key? I'm looking for it and I can't find it. Where do we have it up here? Here we go. Down here, that's the reason why. It's not in red. But as you can see, this line here, it's 12181.com. That is the authentication key specifically for Citibank. So Bank of America has its own authentication key, and Citibank has its own. Okay, let's look at what is actually being posted out. This is where the authentication key is sent by a post request using HTTP. Okay, and again, down here, let's look for we've got the user agent, which sends you back basic information about the session and what is actually being run on the end machine. And let's take a look at the redirection next, okay? Because what the Dread malware is actually doing is asking for a redirection, and it's using information in the HTTP header. Let's see that in actually taking place. There you can see the ping command up there. Here you can see the authentication key that we referred to before. So that's the request. The request goes out, command and control server, here I am, respond. Here is the response that comes back. Okay, obviously we're about to black out where the response comes from. Okay, now we look at another example here. Again, at the top there, you've got the ping request that's going out to the user. That's the authentication key. Now, you're seeing different numbers here because these were different organizations that were being attacked. So if you look at the language type, just above the HTTP header, you see that's set into Spanish, so that gives it away that this was a Spanish client that was infected. And we come down, and here we've got the response. HTTP found, you've got the location there, and you've got the response coming back. Okay. Points of sale. I want to steal your credit card. I said, when I mentioned point of sales, I just had one or two heads nodding. So what I'll do is I'll just cover what a point of sale. Do most people understand what a point of sale device is? Yeah? Yes. Yeah, okay, so I won't cover what that is. Basically, when you go and purchase a nice shirt from a shop such as Zara, and you don't have any cash, you take out your little card here, and they basically swipe it in the terminal. That is a point of sales device. Now, point of sales devices, don't worry too much about the information that we've got on here. I'm going to cover all of these off as we move through the slides. Points of sales devices are particularly attractive for malicious actors to attack. Why? The point of sale device, when it handles the data that is swiped, that data isn't encrypted, it's running in memory encrypted. And there's two types of data that when you swipe it, there's two types of data that's processed. Track 1 and track 2 data. Okay? Track 1 data includes this long number on your card here. Yeah. It includes the CCV2. If I've got the right number of V's in there, this data here, and you also have the expiration date. That is track one data. So every time you go in and you hand over your card, not just at retailers, so you can do this at bars, you can do this wherever, but do the swipe, that's track one data. In memory, encrypted. Okay? Track two data is the data that's stored in this magnetic black stripe that we've got here. Type 1 and type 2 data. So just keep that in mind, type 1 and type 2 data. That's what's being processed when you're actually swiping the card through the point of sales device. What we're going to specifically take a look at, these are all different types of points of sales malware. We're going to take a look at jackpots in detail. Okay. I'm not going to talk through this entire flow diagram, this pictorial representation, but I'm going to pick out the most significant parts. Now, type 1 and type 2 data, one of the other ways of actually obtaining this data is to physically go along and attach a skimming device. And you've seen this because we've had the bad guys attaching skimming devices to ATMs, for example. So I don't know, certainly here in Germany, but in the UK, that's quite prevalent. We see lots of stories in the press about skimming devices. Now, cyber criminals are generally quite lazy, and what they generally want to do is they want to find the easiest, the simplest, and the weakest target to attack, because that's where they'll get their greatest returns. So why attack a point of sale device? Number one, it is a weak point. Most point of sales devices are running Windows and are running outdated versions of Windows as well. I'm not saying that that's the case everywhere, but generally. Now, prior to them becoming focused for attacks, they wouldn't have really been high up on the list of priorities for institutions to actually patch and to make sure that they had the right security controls in place. Okay, so there's two reasons. Thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, you've got the track 1 and track 2 data. It's not actually encrypted when it's in memory. So, the cyber criminal is sat there thinking, aha, what I need to do is if I can develop a piece of malware that I can actually install on a large number of points of sales devices, because there's lots of them out there, okay? I think last year almost 60% of total retail transactions were actually completed using a point of sale device. Now we know cyber criminals are very good at researching information, so you can assume that if I know that, they know that, and again that's another reason to try and go after the point of sales. Okay? And also if you think about it, the large volume of customer data that's processed, that represents a massive honeypot for the fraudsters to attack, together with the weak security. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this track 1 and track 2 data. You can actually see here, this is communication between jackpots, okay, and the command and control server. You've got a post HTTP request here. What you see highlighted here is the MAC address. Now, why they've captured that MAC address, I can only assume that it helps with management information. And I'm going to show you that management information because they've developed a really nice GUI for their command and control server where you can actually take a look at lots of interesting statistics. So they're actually collecting a unique identifier. Then here you can see T1, and on the far side you can see T2. So those are the two types of data that are actually being captured. In this instance, they've actually been encoded in base64. Okay, some of you might be thinking, point of sales devices, how do they get compromised? They're not connected to the internet. And you would be absolutely correct in that assumption. So what the fraudsters, the malicious actors have to do is that they have to compromise a corporate network. So this is where it becomes a much bigger problem. Rather than simply focusing on, does my organization use a point of sale device? No, this isn't relevant to me. It is relevant to you because if there's any part of your network segment that links to a point of sale, they will go after it. So what the malicious actors need to do in the first instance is that they need to go and find an external or web-facing website. Once they find that, they will attempt to compromise it. It is possible to compromise because jackpots and all of those other pieces of malware that I showed you, they've all done that. Once they're inside the corporate network, they then perform a reconnaissance, because what they need to understand is that they need to sit there quietly, okay, and they need to understand which part of the network segment is actually involved in processing POS payments, where the POS terminals will be talking with and talking to. Once that has been found, they then infect the POS terminal and are able to capture the data. Now, some of the techniques here at Blueliv that we've seen that we use is that they will attempt to scrub out log files and also tamper with endpoint security tools. Many of you might be thinking, well, that might be tricky to do with CM tools in place. In theory, it should be, but the success of JackPOS and those other pieces of malware prove to you that they are successful. Obviously, if you've got a CM in place, you've got to check the alerts, and we know that there's a large number of alerts that are coming out. And again, this kind of case study shows that you can bypass existing security controls. So you've got the type 1 and the type 2 data, and this is where it gets really interesting. The type 1, or track 1 data, which was the number at the front, the expiration date, the CCV2 number. In underground forums where we have been researching, we've discovered that the track 1 data is sold for as little as 50 cents. And at the top end of the market, it's actually sold for $5. The more significant of the two data types is reflected in the price point in the underground economy. Type 2 data, which is the magnetic stripe, sells for $100 per card. That's a massive amount of money. So there's the incentive to go after every point of sales device that you can potentially find, because the returns are huge. Well, why would they want the magnetic card stripe? Why is the magnetic card stripe data worth more? Because you can clone the card. So either the criminals themselves will clone the card, or they'll sell it on to other criminals that will enable them to clone the card. You then take the card and you can use it in a physical world where you don't need to authenticate with a PIN. For example, America would be a good example, because even though they are rolling out chip and PIN, there's many places in the States where it hasn't yet been rolled out. Okay. Now, what we've been focusing here so far, we've been looking at, well, what does the client-side infection look like? What is the kind of information that's being passed back and forth? What we want to look at now is, what does the command and control server look like? So this is an actual command and control server that we were able to intercept and we were able to examine in detail. Now, when I was speaking about the MAC address and I was talking about management information, the criminals, the malicious actors put a great deal of thought in providing customer service and a good end user experience to the criminals that they're actually selling to. Because what you have here is, if you were to purchase this as a complete service, which you can do as a criminal, you can actually purchase this command and control infrastructure, infected assets, as an end-to-end service, and what you do is you log on, and this is where you actually see what the returns have been for your investment. So what you have, total number of bots, those are the points of sales, the infected assets. Over on the far side of the slide, you've got productive bots, and online productive bots, and online bots. Unfortunately, we didn't have a glossary of what the criminals were referring to when they were talking about a productive bot, an online bot, and an online productive bot, how they actually distinguish between those. But those are all currently live compromised devices. You've got the ability to manage your bots here, to check your dumps, and I'm going to show you the dump screen in a second, and also to check your settings. What this command and control server gives the criminals the ability to do is, from this panel, you can actually send, there's 3 specific commands that you can send from the command and control server to the endpoint. Those are update, kill, and execute. Update, as the name suggests, is the ability to update the version of the malware that's running on the infected device. Now, we know that the malicious actors are also using Google and are looking at some of the excellent papers that researchers and organizations like Blueliv are publishing about malware, and they're thinking, aha, they've detected the malware, we need to change it. We need to alter it slightly so they're not able to detect it. So from this command and control server, you can update the version that you're running. You can also update it by visiting a URL. The URL is served by the command and control server, and it can direct the infected asset to the relevant URL to update it. The kill command has the ability to actually kill the instance of the POS software that's running. Now the reason being, there could be two reasons for that. One, it may have simply crashed and you want to respawn it and get it up and running again. Or secondly, you may have decided I have extracted as much data as I want, as much data as I can potentially handle, and I'm going to basically come out of the network, but I want to remove my tracks. So I'm going to uninstall the malware, I'm going to clean up, I'm going to kill the software, and I'm going to remove it from the auto start. So the other feature of the POS malware is the ability to actually embed itself into the auto start function. So those are the three commands that it runs. Here is where you've got the list of dumps. So if you were a criminal and you were logging in to the command and control server and you wanted to take a look at, well, what are my infected assets? What is the data that I've captured? You can see that on the screen itself. Okay. I'm just going to pause there for a second because we've covered banking trojans and I've covered point of sales malware, and ask, do we have any questions at this point? No. Okay. Brilliant. Now, password stealers, we're going to focus in on two in particular, pony and carbon grabbing, because these are the most prevalent of those that are in existence. Now, the password stealer, in terms of pony, interestingly, the code for the pony password stealer was released into the general underground community at the start of 2014. So what we then discovered was that other pieces of malware, such as ransomware, for example, were actually developing modules where they were bolting on this pony stealer onto their ransomware malware and combining the two together. The dangers associated with criminals releasing their code to the wider market. It has the ability, these are the main modules, to steal passwords from password vaults and passwords from all of these modules that you can see. RAS, Cisco VPN, ASP.NET. Now that, I'm not saying that each of these applications is inherently insecure, but the malware targets these and is able to actually collect passwords from these. You've got instant messengers, you've got email clients, you've got browsers, you've got FTP servers as well. Okay, this is a pictorial representation of what is the thought flow that the malware goes through when you get a target and deciding what does it want to steal. Okay? And just down here, the credentials are posted back to the command and control server. We're going to look at the command and control server functionality between the command and control server and the client. And here we are. You can see here, this is the pony command and control communication. For those of you that are the techies in the audience, you might be thinking, hey, there's only 199 bytes there. This was just a proof of concept for us, so that's why the data there is so small. I'm going to skip this slide. It's just for the techies. This is just a hex representation of data in a packet. If you want to come and talk to me about this later on, I'm more than happy to do so. Again, this is very, very technical, but quickly covering there's 4 layers within which the data that is stolen, it's packed into a binary structure, and it consists of 4 layers. Layer 1, they encrypt their data to make sure that it can't be stolen. They take some security measures as well. Layer 2, in layer 2 you can include an authentication key, so that wraps itself around the data, and the bot master, if he so wishes to do so, can actually put an encryption key in there, sorry, not an authentication, encryption key. Layer 3 is where the criminals are actually reducing the packet size of the data. They use an internal algorithm to pack the data, reduce the packet size, because basically they want to save on costs. They're going to be processing huge amounts of data, and they want to reduce the packet size. And layer 4 are those modules that you saw in the previous slide, you know, the RSA, the VPN, and all that good stuff. That's where those modules are specifically embedded. Now, what it actually does, we've got a PHP script that processes all the incoming data. We're going to take a look at that. And this is the slide where it's processed. So what you can see up there in the top left is the actual QFTP piece of software that is used. It's going to decrypt the password, and the $key and the $IV functions in this instance have actually been hard-coded into the script. They were reversed by the criminals, and they were then added into this script here. Okay. What does the command and control server look like? Again, providing lots of, if you can describe it as business intelligence to the end criminal who's using this. If you look at this graph here, you've got, it's not particularly clear, but these are the different types of passwords that have been compromised over the last 24 hours. So you've got FTTP, HTTP represented by the purple line, and also email clients here. And needless to say, here you've got countries from where the compromise took place. I'm not going to dwell too long on this. These are popular FTP clients that have been compromised. Okay, popular email clients. And you also, if you look onto the command and control server, I'll just point out your journeys here, it also actually tells you just the level of infections that you have broken down by country. Okay, this is heat maps produced specifically by the Blueliv platform. Okay, and this basically heat map is tracking where the botnets are operating around the globe. Again, specific questions around these heat maps, please come and find me in the main auditorium, and I'm more than happy to pick my brain around questions. This is point of sales malware that we're tracking, and malware designed to steal credit cards, the hotspots around the globe where countries are most impacted. That's where the malware is most active. Now, where is it that, coming on to Blueliv, what is Blueliv? Just basically sharing with you a lot of the research that we've been carrying out, a lot of the information that we've been pulling out, and taking that information and embedding that information into our cyber threat intelligence platform. The cyber threat intelligence that we're actually providing you is very, very targeted. It's targeted in the sense that we will tell you what information out there specifically impacts you as an organization. So I'm going to come to specific examples later on. What we have is we've taken the cyber kill chain and tried to explain precisely where does the cyber threat intelligence platform work. Obviously, when the criminals are looking to extract data, okay, that's where we'll operate. You've seen the command and control level at which we operate, because you've seen how we're able to intercept that communication. I'm going to talk about infection, and I'm going to talk about redirection and luring the customers in the next couple of slides. What does the platform consist of? The platform is very, very user-friendly. You do not need to be an IT expert to use it. It is simply a case of point and click. The hard technical work is done in the background. What's the significance of that? You can ingest a vast amount of information and have it in a format in which you can ingest it. It's in a ready-to-use format. So let me give you an example of the data sets that populate each of these modules. Currently we have 8 modules. Okay? But this isn't a stagnant platform, because what we're constantly doing, we're constantly developing new modules as new threats emerge, and we drop them into the platform. So as an end user, you don't have to upgrade, there's no process whereby you need to shut down your systems, etc., etc. When you see a new module in our ecosystem, you can select that module, you can switch it on, and you can use it. So as a quick example, if you're a bank and you don't currently have a mobile app, you might say, I'm not interested in the mobile app. That can be switched off. It's as simple as that. Okay? For example, if you're a financial services company, you work in insurance, you're not going to be interested in carding. No problem. Switch the carding module off. That's how customizable it is. We take the modules and we create a bespoke solution for the organization in question. The diverse range of threats, all in a single platform. And that's also quite key. Okay? You're not having to go and find a vendor that does botnets, that does malware, that does credit card, that monitors mobile app marketplaces, that does phishing, that monitors activism. And some organisations are using 3 or 4 vendors to achieve all of this coverage. Within the Blueliv cyber threat intelligence platform, all of it's covered from a single touch point. Okay? Botnets. What's contained within botnets? This is where we will tell you, if you have a transactional-based website, we will tell you the username, the password, the URL, and the infected IP from which the connection was made. And we will also tell you what that user was infected with. So what's the malware family that's infected that user? Okay? Now, if you're working with us, the setup, and I encourage any of you that are sort of look at me a little suspiciously and say, is all this true? Do please come and approach me and discuss a proof of concept with me, because we're quite happy to show the power of the platform. We're able to pull those 3 data sets back for you. Just think about that. Username, password, URL, and the infected IP. What does that give you? Very clear, very precise, very targeted intelligence. You can go along to the end user and pull the cable. You can block that account. You can enhance the authentication, because the intelligence that we're giving you is very, very precise. Not only transactional-based websites, we're able to recover credentials belonging to internal systems that have been compromised. Again, the username, the password, and the URL to the business app, whether that be remote office or whether that be procurement. And we're also, again, able to give you the IP address, so you can go and identify that machine on your network and pull the cable. No need to have emergency meetings, no need to initiate incident response. You've got the evidence that you need to act decisively. We also recover where users have been slightly naughty and have taken their corporate email addresses and used them at third-party websites. Then we tell you, by the way, this user is using his corporate email address at Amazon, and is in fact infected with this particular malware, Pony. Okay? There's lots of other data sets. Again, just in the interest of time, I'm constrained by time. I really would love to talk to you all about the different types of data sets. Again, I encourage you to come and speak to me after this presentation. Targeted malware, really, really significant. What you can actually do is you can take a binary, you can upload the binary to us, and we will give you a detailed forensic report. I'm talking about providing the end user with a digital footprint of every single instance that piece of malware is making on the end system. We will include the encryption keys. What is it actually injecting into the session? Which URL is actually being attacked? Very, very targeted, very, very precise. Okay? We can actually also configure your corporate AV, and you can actually establish, by looking at the module, whether or not your corporate AV is capable of detecting this piece of malware. As we know, AV isn't capable of tracking down all the different samples. What we're focusing on, and we're not an antivirus company, we're focusing on what do you need to be worried about as an organisation. Why? Because this specific piece of malware is attacking your organisation. That's your number 1 priority. Understanding what's attacking me, why is it attacking me, how is it attacking me, and all of that is provided in the malware module. Carding module is very, very simple. We actually display the username, password, and the card number that has been compromised. Okay? So these are cards that are actively being traded in underground forums. Now, the beauty of all this is that you can one click export that into an Excel spreadsheet and fire it off to whoever needs to action it. We have a flexible API, and the fact that the API runs in a JSON format, and it can take up the information from these modules and feed it back into any kind of middleware component that you have. So if you want to take compromised IPs and you want to feed it into your perimeter security devices, you can do it from these modules. Again, hacktivism, data leakage, phishing and cyber brand abuse, all of those are self-explanatory. I just want to point something out about the mobile app marketplace monitoring. We monitor the mobile apps, we tell you about unofficial use, claimed affiliation, but most importantly, if that mobile app is malicious, you're going to put it up in the targeted malware, and we will give you a detailed forensic report on that malware, all in one place. You do not need a 25-page document to tell you what a piece of malware does. In the targeted malware module, we present you with 3 or 4 screens that tells you precisely what that malware is doing and why it is doing that. How does this work? We've got ingest, analysis, and presentation. Ingest is where we're grabbing the information from. Okay, we've got a lot of automation built into that platform, so it means that it scales massively. Okay, we've got human researchers in here as well. We've got the analysis layer where we take the raw data, sort it, and then we've got the presentation layer. I just briefly touched upon the API, and this is a pictorial representation of all of the different places where we're ingesting data. That's not an exhaustive list, it's a representative list. Okay, filters. Filters give you the ability to basically take this targeted cyber intelligence, hone it down even further, and pick out the parts that are actually relevant to you. Okay, filters are associated with conditions, and filters, these are the conditions that are attached to it, these are the actions, and from the platform you can get real-time alerts. So every time a targeted piece of intelligence comes in, you get an alert. It can be sent to you, to your email address, you can log in and you can check. Okay? Obviously, if you're getting thousands of alerts, you've got a big problem, and I would hope that any organisation that we're working with isn't in that situation. Again, the complexity in terms of actually fine-tuning this for your individual organisation, again, I encourage you to come and talk to me, and I can explain that in much more detail. These are some of the GUIs. I'm sorry, I'm just sort of glancing over to make sure I'm not going to be kicked off at any second. I've been given a time warning. This is the GUI interface that you can see in front of you that we have. And again, I can show you this in much more detail if you come and speak to me. Okay, we do also have, very importantly, plugins for CMs. So we've already got a plugin for ArcSight, Alien Vault, and Splunk, and we've got a couple more roadmap for this year. Okay, we've got those, and these are the dashboards that will be integrated into your CM solution. Okay, one final point before I run out of time. This is a crime tracker that again you get if you take on the Blueliv cyber threat platform. It gives you the IP and it gives you the domain. Now, what makes this far more interesting than simply bad IP addresses, I can't show you in the presentation, but I can show you if you can come and talk to me, is if you look at type and subtype, we can actually tell you what is that malicious domain or that malicious IP, what is it actually serving up? Is it serving up Zeus? Is it serving up a backdoor? Is it serving up phishing? Okay, it's quite key because it's very, very granular. And is it actually live and serving up content right now? Okay. In terms of what is it that we here at Blueliv focus in on? What we focus in on is working with our clients, working with organizations to reduce the window of opportunity. Okay? Lots of other people talk about cyber kill chains and APTs, etc., etc. One thing that we do know, it's very difficult to completely prevent. There's no silver bullet that's going to prevent you as an organisation getting infected or your end customers or third parties that you work with. But what you can focus in on is you can focus in on the window of opportunity that the malicious actors have within which to act. Now, if that is narrowed down to a matter of minutes, right, the damage that they can cause is severely limited. And one thing that we all know is that if you make yourself an extremely difficult target from which they can take data from, they're going to move on to the next organisation. And the key here is driving down the window of opportunity, pushing them away to another target. What the platform, and this is really key down here, what the platform gives an organisation, because these are challenges that face all organisations. You collect the data, you correlate the data, you categorize the data, you integrate the data, and then most importantly, you act. You act because we provide you with targeted cyber intelligence. This is not fuzzy, it's very precise. We tell you what, why, and when. We give you the information that you need to go and act. And I'm going to finish there, sorry. I'll open it up for, do we have time for questions? Yeah, so I'm open to any questions. And again, if anybody wants to, again, I emphasise, I'm very easy to talk to. If you want to come and talk to me privately, that's perfectly acceptable.